a laugh that echoed across the bank in the quiet hum of an ordinary afternoon. The bank felt like a waiting room for routine lives until his laughter cracked through the air like breaking glass. The millionaire didn't just laugh. He performed it, a staged, indulgent sound that said more than words ever could. He leaned back as if the world belonged to him, as if dignity was something he could afford to mock. And all she wanted was the simplest thing a person can ask in a country that promises fairness: to check her balance. 90 years old. Small frame, steady eyes. A life's worth of storms carried gently on her shoulders. She spoke softly, with that respectful tone elders use when they were raised to say please, even to people who never earned it. She didn't flinch. She didn't shrink. She just stood there, present, unashamed of who she was or where she came from. But he laughed, loud enough for strangers to notice, loud enough for the room to choose sides. Some pretended not to hear. Others watched, the way people watch injustice, and hope someone else will stop it. He laughed like wealth was armor, like money meant superiority, like an old black woman asking a simple question was somehow entertainment. You could feel history in the silence that followed. Generations of dismissal. Generations of being told to wait, to be quiet, to accept disrespect because power speaks loud and dignity whispers. She was dignity. He was power. And in that moment, it felt like the same old story America tells too often. The comfortable mocking the noble. The rich mistaking cruelty for confidence. Yet she stood there, calm, her hands folded with patience. That came from surviving everything he could never imagine. There was no anger in her eyes, only certainty, like she knew something he didn't, like time itself was on her side. The room didn't know it yet, but the moment was about to flip, and every entitled chuckle in the air was counting down to silence. People from every walk of life watched, each of them knowing this wasn't just about money, it was about respect, about who gets to feel small and who gets to stand tall, because the screen was waiting, the truth was waiting, and what that machine was about to reveal would turn humiliation into history, arrogance into awe, and ignorance into stunned quiet. It was coming fast, but the numbers on that screen would wipe the smirk off his millionaire face and change everything in the room. A lifetime versus a fortune before the laughter, before the humiliation. There was a story in that room that nobody could see yet, because dignity doesn't walk in shouting. It walks in quietly, wrapped in years that the world rarely respects. I've had lived through decades that reshaped nations, survived seasons that would have broken louder people, and carried memories that didn't need applause to matter. She was born into a world that didn't expect her to dream, in a country that once told women like her to take what they were given and be grateful for it. Yet she grew up determined anyway, not loud, not reckless, just persistent. She worked when work didn't love her back. She raised family when the world didn't care if they made it. She stood up for fairness, not with microphones, but with resilience. She saw marches. She heard speeches. She watched laws change while hearts dragged behind. And through it all, she'll never let bitterness claim her spirit. She believed in something better, even when better felt like a rumor. Her hands once carried groceries, children, prayers, and tired nights. Her eyes had seen injustice normalize itself and then pretend it was gone. The world had pushed her aside many times, yet here she was, at 90, still standing, still proud, still insisting that she deserved to be acknowledged. She wasn't wealthy in the loud way. She was wealthy in the quiet way, wealthy in endurance, wealthy in wisdom, wealthy in the kind of grace that history eventually bows to. For people like her, every day was proof that survival itself could be a victory. And then there was him, the millionaire, raised in comfort, so normal it never felt like privilege to him. Success came wrapped in the illusion that he alone had earned it, that life was fair because it favored him. Money wasn't something he respected. It was something he wore like identity. It gave him confidence, not compassion. He learned early that people listened when you had wealth, so he mistook silence from others as agreement, and deference as proof that he was superior. He believed he understood the world, even though the only parts he ever really knew were padded, polished, convenient. He didn't have to fight for dignity. It came with a suit. He didn't know resilience. He only knew advantage. And so arrogance became his language. Mocking became his comfort. Looking down on others became his default reflex to lives. One shaped by storms, one shaped by shelter, one defined by what she endured, the other by what he never had to. And that is the real political story hidden in a simple moment at a bank. A society quicker to respect dollars than decades, quicker to honor fortune than character, quicker to listen to those who have than those who have survived. In that room, these weren't just two people. They were two Americas facing each other. One America built the backbone of this nation and got applause only in hindsight. The other inherited power and assumed it meant moral authority. She stood there representing every grandmother who stayed strong when the world tried to minimize them. He stood there representing every comfortable ego that believed humanity could be measured in accounts. And the tragic truth is that the system often agrees with him. The system bows to wealth, while wisdom waits patiently at the counter. But patience isn't weakness. Sometimes patience is a fuse. Sometimes history hides inside quiet people, waiting for the right moment to remind arrogance that power is never permanent and respect should never be conditional. So when she finally stepped forward to that counter, she didn't step forward alone. History stepped with her, and what happened next left everyone speechless. Mockery in broad daylight. It didn't take long for the moment to sour. The millionaire didn't just look at her. He sized her up like she was an inconvenience in human form. He let out a scoff, first low and dismissive, then louder, making sure the room heard it. He cracked a smile that wasn't really a smile, more like a performance of superiority, and said things loud enough for people to pretend not to hear while hearing everything. Why was she here? Why was she wasting time? Couldn't she just go home? Couldn't someone explain basic banking to her? He layered his cruelty with jokes, as if humor could disguise disrespect, as if comedy could excuse cruelty. The employees hesitated. You could see them trying to stay professional while the air grew heavy with something they couldn't ignore. They looked at him with forced politeness and at her with that awkward pity that tries to be kindness but carries a quiet assumption. She doesn't belong in the same conversation as him. That unspoken hierarchy hung in the room. Wealth on one side, lived history on the other. Power speaking loudly, dignity forced to stay calm. People started watching, not because they were curious about banking, but because they sensed something bigger happening. Some pretended to scroll on their phones while angling their screens to record. A couple of whispering voices drifted through the room. One laughed nervously. Another shook their head. Someone muttered, "That's messed up," under their breath, but didn't step forward. That's how humiliation works in public. It spreads, like a quiet fire, while everyone hopes someone else becomes the firefighter. The subtle racism filled the spaces between his words. It wasn't slurs. It wasn't overt hatred. It was that casual, comfortable disrespect that comes from believing certain people should know their place. He spoke to her like she was naive, like she was a relic, like she was slow. He spoke in that tone society often uses against elders, against women, against black dignity, patronizing, performative, smug. It was the kind of tone that says, "I'm superior, and I expect the room to agree." And the worst part, for a moment, the room did. Silence can be complicity, and silence was loud. She stood there, still and steady, as if years of dealing with this kind of arrogance had taught her how to survive without surrendering. She didn't argue, she didn't match his volume, she didn't justify herself to him. Her quietness wasn't weakness. It was strength, refusing to perform for someone's ego. But for every second she stayed silent, the cruelty dragged longer, and the injustice stung deeper. Phones, captured angles, imagined headlines formed in people's minds. You could almost feel the internet waking up in advance, ready to do what the room wouldn't: judge, analyze, side with someone, turn a private indignity into a public spectacle. This wasn't just a bank anymore. It was a stage where America's old habits replayed themselves. Those who had power laughed. Those who deserved respect swallowed it, and everyone else watched like an audience waiting for a punchline. He kept going, enjoying the attention like it was applause. He leaned casually, spun jokes about people who don't understand money, as if wealth automatically translated to wisdom. He exaggerated his impatience. He raised his voice, not in anger but in mock theatrical annoyance. The performance was disgusting and yet familiar. It was the same pattern society has seen too many times: arrogance cloaked as humor, supremacy disguised as confidence. And yet, beneath all the noise, something else was building. Frustration in the air, anger behind the silence, a growing tension that felt like a storm holding its breath. Viewers, witnesses, anyone watching felt the same thing. This was wrong. Deeply wrong. Morally wrong. Historically wrong. Historically wrong. The kind of wrong that begs for balance, for justice, for truth to punch back. The employees finally moved to process her request, not out of courage, but because even humiliation has to pause eventually. The banker's fingers hovered over the keyboard like a moment of reckoning was approaching faster than anyone expected. The millionaire smirked, confident the world would, and continued to revolve around his assumptions. But there was something in the air, a quiet sense that reality was about to flip on him in a way he never saw coming. Because when the banker finally typed in her account number, the room went silent. No one breathed, and the screen revealed something that shattered every assumption. The balance that broke the millionaire. The cursor blinked on the screen like the heartbeat of a moment no one was ready for. The banker hesitated, then pressed enter. Numbers filled the monitor, and suddenly the world stopped breathing. Eyes widened, jaws loosened. Silence fell so sharply it felt like gravity had shifted. No one laughed now. No one smirked. The millionaire's grin collapsed first. It didn't fade gently. It broke. His eyebrows twitched, his posture straightened, and his mouth parted just enough to betray what he had never felt in rooms like this: disbelief and fear. Because it wasn't tens, it wasn't thousands, it wasn't even hundreds of thousands. It was millions. More money than he expected any woman like her to ever even see, let alone control. More than enough to silence arrogance, drown ego, and drag every smug assumption straight into the ground. The numbers glowed back at them, powerful without speaking, undeniable without argument, holy in a way that demanded respect. This wasn't a cute surprise, this wasn't a lucky accident. This was correction. This was cosmic balance. This was a lifetime of dignity standing loudly in silence. The employees who, moments earlier, hesitated now shifted like they had just realized. Royalty was standing in front of them. Their tone changed, their backs straightened, their voices softened. The air turned reverent. The same people who once pitied her now respected her. That quiet, uncomfortable pity disappeared like it had never existed at all. Suddenly she wasn't seen as fragile, or slow, or out of place. Now she was ma'am, now she was important, now she was worth their full attention. And the millionaire couldn't stop staring. His confidence leaked out of him like air from a punctured balloon. He tried to find a joke and couldn't. He tried to reclaim superiority, but it was gone. He had built his entire identity on standing above people, but now he was standing beneath the very person he mocked. His pride didn't just break, it fractured into tiny pieces right there on the marble bank floor. All his wealth suddenly felt smaller, cheaper, less meaningful, because in that room, she wasn't money rich. She was reality rich. She was history rich. She was respect rich. And he had none of that. She didn't celebrate. She didn't smirk. She didn't throw the humiliation back at him, though no one would have blamed her if she did. She remained too calm, serene, almost sacred. She didn't need to brag, because dignity never needs a microphone. Her silence spoke louder than his laughter ever could. She simply existed in truth, and truth did the talking. This wasn't just a balanced number. It was a mirror held up to society. It was proof that wealth does not define worth. It was proof that respect should never be conditional. And it was proof that America has a dangerous habit of underestimating the very people who carried this nation on their backs. She represented every elder who worked 3 jobs so their kids could stand taller. Every immigrant who believed in opportunity even when opportunity shut doors in their face. Every black woman who survived a world that loved their strength but rarely offered its respect. He represented something too. He represented entitlement disguised as success. He represented a society that assumes power belongs to those who are loudest, richest, most comfortable. He represented the dangerous belief that money equals superiority, character equals nothing, and humanity can be ignored if your bank account is loud enough. But now the room knew better. Everyone watching knew better. Even the cameras, even the strangers online who would eventually see this moment, would know better. Because this wasn't humiliation anymore. This was revelation. This was justice dressed as irony. This was history correcting arrogance in real time. Her breathing was steady. Her gaze was gentle. She didn't revel in his discomfort because her life had never been about defeating people like him. Her life had been about surviving them, outlasting them, waiting long enough for truth to arrive. And truth had arrived on a glowing screen, with more zeros than anyone expected, wrapped in poetic justice and hard-earned grace. She didn't suddenly become worthy because she had money. She had always been worthy. The world was finally caught up, and every person who had stayed silent before felt it. Now felt that sting of shame, that weight of realization. This moment wasn't just about a number. It was about everything. That number shattered stereotypes, assumptions, quiet prejudices people pretend they don't have. Standing there, she wasn't just herself anymore. She was every lesson America keeps trying not to learn. She was the reminder that dignity should never have to prove itself. She was the living truth that those who look small in a biased world are often giants waiting patiently for the world to see clearly. And as the millionaire stood frozen, humbled by a reality he never prepared for, the moment held a room hostage. Something had shifted forever. Respect had moved. Power had moved. Truth had taken the microphone, and nobody dared interrupt. But the most powerful moment wasn't the number on the screen. It was what she said next. Because her words didn't just humble a millionaire, they humbled an entire mindset. The lesson he never expected. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The room leaned toward her as if dignity itself had decided to speak. She looked at him the way elders look at storms they've already survived, steady and unafraid. And when she finally opened her mouth, her words didn't come out sharp. They came out human. She told him she had lived long enough to know that money can buy comfort, but it cannot buy character. She told him she had seen powerful men fall and humble people rise, and the difference between them was never the size of their wealth, only the size of their hearts. She reminded him that every elder he mocks is a story he doesn't understand, a pillar he didn't help build, a survivor of battles he never had to fight. She spoke about respect the way some people talk about faith. Something sacred, something you practice, not something you perform. She said she was taught that you treat people like they matter because they do, not because of what they carry in their pockets or what society thinks they're worth. She said she had watched her people walk through decades where dignity was denied, where humanities had to be insisted on every single day, and still they chose to stand up straight. Still they chose to love. Still they chose to build a life in a world that didn't always welcome them. And if she could hold dignity through all of that, then surely he could hold it in a bank lobby for 5 minutes. She didn't lecture him. She invited him to be better. She told him the world had enough arrogance. The world had enough loud cruelty pretending to be confidence. What the world needed, what America needed, were people willing to remember that every person in the room carries a universe of struggle and memory behind their eyes. She reminded him that one day he too would grow old, and he would pray that someone looked at him with kindness instead of convenience, with humanity instead of hollow politeness. She looked at him not as an enemy, but as a student life had failed to teach, and in that moment, silence became education. The bank was no longer a bank, it was a classroom. It was a history lesson. It was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful voice in the room isn't the richest one. It's the one that has lived the longest without losing compassion. Employees listened. Strangers listened. Even the phone's recording felt smaller. In the presence of something this real, her words didn't humiliate him. They revealed him. They showed how small arrogance looks standing next to endurance. They showed how foolish power appears when confronted by grace. And when she finished, she didn't wait for applause. She didn't look for validation. She simply thanked the banker, lifted her purse, straightened her shoulders, and walked forward like a queen who had always known her crown was invisible, but undeniable. The room didn't move until she did. Something had shifted. Something had healed. Something had been corrected. She had walked in as a customer. She walked out as a reminder to him, to everyone, to the country watching that respect is not a gift granted by wealth. It is a right carried by humanity. And while the millionaire stood there frozen, the world outside kept talking, because this moment didn't end in that bank. It exploded across America, not more than money, a mirror to America. The story didn't stay inside that bank. By the time the doors closed, phones were buzzing, timelines filling, voices replaying the moment. Dignity stood taller than money. People shared the clip not for spectacle, but for truth. Comment sections turned into confession booths. Some admitted they'd judged elders before. Others said they saw their grandmother in her strength. Activists called it a lesson. Every day, people called it justice. Across neighborhoods, classrooms, dinner tables, people talked about respect like it mattered again. It became bigger than one millionaire, bigger than one bank, bigger than one woman. It became a mirror held up to a country that often bows to wealth and forgets to bow to humanity. It reminded America that age is not weakness. Age is a crown. It reminded us that arrogance may be loud, but dignity echoes longer. And somewhere, in that echo, hope returned. Hope that we can be softer with each other. Hope that we can honor the people who paved the road we walk. Hope that maybe we are learning, because in the end the lesson wasn't about money at all. It was about worth, love, memory, and the kind of respect that every human being should receive. And maybe, just maybe, the next time someone like her walks in, they won't have to prove they deserve respect.